700 WLW podcast. Catch Scott Sloan weekdays at 9:06 on 700 WLW.
Hey, it's Sloaney, and it's Tuesday morning at 700 WLW. Welcome to the show. So in very obvious ways, in some subtle ways, religion pretty much impacts not only what we do, me and you do, and the decisions we make on a daily basis, but, of course, public policy and a whole host of other things. I mean, look at the headlines from Ashley Madison to Kentucky Clerk of Courts and everything in between. He has several books out. His name's Dr. Darrel Ray. One is The God Virus, How Religion Affects Our Lives and Daily Culture. And he joins me now to talk about it on the big one. Good morning, Doc. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Dr. Darrel, weren't you in Run DMC, or is that I'm thinking of somebody else?
You must be singing somebody else.
All right. It's pretty. You got pretty big stones to come out and write a book to compare God to a virus, which just on the surface is going to offend a whole lot of people. Inferring it's something to be eradicated. Religion, though, is generally a good thing, isn't it?
No, I wouldn't agree with that. Not generally. If you think about every time you want to have sex, is Jesus in the bedroom with you? Is that a good thing? That's kind of what my thesis is when I wrote my book, Sex and God. Mm-hmm. Is that when you get
However, if I'm standing in a store and I go, hey, I'm going to do the 5-finger discount and take a handful of this Brock's candy, Jesus looking over my shoulder going, you probably shouldn't do that. Doesn't that kind of balance things out?
Well, I don't need Jesus to tell me stealing is bad. In fact, most cultures that don't even have Jesus, and they don't have a stealing problem. There's not a stealing problem in Sweden, which is one of the most atheist countries on the planet. What I'm trying to tell people is religion tells you unnatural things to do. For example, don't masturbate. Josh Duggar was told from the time he was born practically, don't masturbate.
Right.
Every 13-year-old boy on the planet practically is masturbating. So when religion tells somebody to do something that is so counter to their biology, is it any trouble? Is any surprise trouble comes out of it? I mean, he molested his own sisters. He molested other girls.
You know, that's an interesting point on the Josh Duggars thing in this show, 19 Kids and Counting, which I never was interested in watching in the first place. But he had a press conference. He said, I'm the biggest hypocrite ever while espousing faith and family values. I've secretly over the last several years been viewing pornography, and this became a secret addiction. I've been unfaithful to my wife. Now, he didn't mention anything about the Ashley Madison data dump, but it came out in the hours after, and, you put the two things together. He also allegedly molested girls as a teenager, including his own sisters, and yet during his press conference, he still had people around him forgiving him almost immediately and then blaming the media, like Bill Cunningham here on this radio station, that somehow it's the media's fault that he committed these horrific acts. And so I see that, I go, how do people stand behind someone like a Josh Duggars and go, it's okay, you're fine, you're the biggest hypocrite ever, you're fine? To me, that just leaves me scratching my head. I don't understand that.
Because almost all the patriarchal religions have a get-out-of-jail-free card. All you have to do is pray to your Jesus or your Allah or whatever, and you are out of jail. And you can go back to doing whatever you want. I mean, these folks are not stopping it. In most of these, he spent a whole career, as has his father and mother, condemning everybody else for doing what he did. Mm-hmm. And I will guarantee you, most of his brothers and most of his sisters are doing the similar stuff. They're just really good at hiding it.
Why does that seem to happen? And maybe it doesn't happen that much with him, but it seems like a lot of high-profile Christians and ones who wear it on their sleeve and will witness are the ones that get caught up in these scandals. Is that true, or is it just because of the hypocrisy and we like to bring down hypocrites?
Oh, no. For every one of those people that got caught and are headlighted in the media, there are hundreds more that got caught by their spouses, but they're not media people. I mean, how many ministers? You can go to a website, for example, called StopBaptistMinistersPredators.org, and it's got a list of hundreds and hundreds of Baptist ministers who have committed heinous crimes against people in their own congregation, mostly sexual crimes. They are not going to be in the headlines every day. You don't have enough newspaper print or radio time to name all the people that are getting caught all the time.
Well, you wonder, too, in the Catholic abuse scandal, how long that went on, and no one would dare report that because they had a fear of repercussion from the church and its followers.
Exactly.
And every time I would talk about it, I get all sorts of flame mail and threats and everything else that somehow I'm a bad person for talking about this. And, that's essentially what led to the problem, is people looking the other way because they're afraid of retribution. That should never be the case.
Right. What religion does is it tells you to do unnatural things. So if you make unnatural things a requirement of the job as a religious leader, is it any surprise that unnatural, very inappropriate behavior comes out? They preach and preach and preach against all sorts of things, and they are themselves doing it behind the scenes. Do you really think that the preacher who preaches against pornography is not looking at pornography?
You know what I'm going to give? Honestly, I'm going to look at that and go, yeah, there's probably enough of them that are, but I think there's really good, strong Christian leaders out there who walk the walk and talk the talk. It sounds like you're discrediting all of them. Obviously, it's hard, and I think it's hard to just simply put a number on. Well, it's half of them, it's all of them, it's most of them, it's just a few of them. It's hard to say, isn't it?
No, it's actually not that hard to say. We know that about 93% of men in the United States watch porn, and about 80% of women. We know that about 95% of men masturbate frequently at some point in their life, and about 80% of women. So we know this of just the general population.
Okay.
Do you really think the leaders are any different? You cannot suppress human sexuality. It is going to get expressed. My point is, let's express it appropriately. Molesting children is not an appropriate way to express your sexuality. Getting on Ashley Madison is when you're preaching against homosexuality and preaching against unfaithfulness is not an appropriate way to express your sexuality. People, you don't need a God or a Jesus or an Allah to tell you that these are inappropriate behaviors because they undermine the very core of our society, and that's the relationships. I mean, yeah, but he's got relationships now that are really, his wife, his family.
Oh, yeah, it's a mess. Absolutely. Yeah. And these are those people that we all love. It's America, so we love to watch train wrecks.
Right.
Dr. Darrel Ray on the show this morning, The God Virus, How Religion Affects Our Lives and Cultures. There's a link to the book on my blog at 700WLW.com. However, you'll agree that this, in the new era, especially things like all the scandals, we've had so many Christian churches form in places like shopping center plazas and in schools and the like, and these people are the non-judgmental, non-denominational churches that, wouldn't really blush about masturbation or anything like that. Are you talking specifically about the fundamentalist religion? Or
no. You go to those churches, which I have many times visited, and they've still got things like purity balls and purity culture, and girls need to not have sex until they're married, and boys should be masturbating. They're teaching this stuff all the time. And they're trying to get into our school systems. They're trying to teach abstinence only to kids in your school system and my school system. Mm-hmm. Well, I don't know about you, but the most religious people, and we've seen this around the country, the most religious people are the ones most likely to get pregnant before they get married, most likely to have STDs, most likely to have other sexual expressions that are inappropriate.
Well, almost like to be poor and rural and a whole bunch of other things as well. And there's certainly, I think, some correlation there, but I think you also have to look at the surroundings as well. How did this, Doctor, how did this get into the political narrative so much? Is it, in polite conversation, it used to be don't talk about religion and politics and you'll be fine. And now religion and politics are one and the same. I don't think you can see a rally anywhere and not have some sort of, appeal to Christian folk. Donald Trump is doing it to a degree. How did this wind up getting in the political narrative?
Well, Jerry Falwell, way back in the late 70s, figured out that if you get religion into politics, you can push your agenda through the political system. So he was very systematic, and then, of course, Pat Robertson was a big part of that. Billy Graham was a huge part of it because he was the one that started it in the 1950s, pushing religion into our system. So, yeah, it's been a long trending. As I say in The God Virus, every religion wants to take over the government. Look at Saudi Arabia. Look at Iran. Look at England before the English Civil War, when the religion dominated the entire culture. Look at the Puritans. They didn't come here for religious freedom. Puritans came here to take over an area and make everybody behave like Puritans. When people say people came here for religious freedom.
Yeah, I mean, but that's true. But at the same time, they got away from the Church of England. They said, screw this. We're going to go find our own place and do our own thing.
Right. And they murdered Catholics and they murdered Quakers in Massachusetts. They were serious about forcing people to abide by their religious rules. We've had this theme throughout. That's why we have a constitution that separates church and state. But you listen to these Christian leaders, and they're saying, no, we need to put God back in the state. Well, we had a whole revolution to stop that.
Right.
That's why the Church of England is not the Church of the United States.
Do you, Doctor, do you look at amusement kind of I do what's going on in Kentucky with what's going on the clerk of three Kirkland courts down there saying that somehow because the high court ruled that gay marriage is okay, that this is infringing on their religious beliefs? I mean, to me, this thing has largely come full circle in the hypocrisy meter. You know, if I had a job where, you know, I don't know, I didn't like pancakes and all of a sudden I went from cooking hamburgers and my boss said, hey, you're making pancakes now, you know, I wouldn't have a protest and have people rally to my defense. I'd find a new job or a new line of work, and ultimately that's how it works in our system. If you are the belief that man is between a marriage between a man and a woman, that's your own deeply held personal beliefs, but it should never ever wind up influencing how you do the work of the people, because that's who you're representing in this case. The whole irony of the freedom of religion thing is just it's appalling to me.
Well, it is, and you can only go back to the 1950s or 40s when people said it's against my religion to serve blacks. And they were serious about it, and they have Bible verses to quote for it. That's the issue. Do you have a right in a secular society to deny people something, a public service, based upon your religious beliefs? We've already decided this. This was decided a long time ago with the civil rights movement. You can't not serve somebody because of your religious beliefs. And whether they're black or Baptist or homosexual.
Or female.
Doesn't matter. Or female. Absolutely. Absolutely.
What do you think would happen if you had, let's say, for example, an agnostic, an atheist, as a clerk of court saying, you know what, because of my deeply held views, I'm not going to marry Christians?
Well, the Christians would probably lynch him.
One would think, right? I mean, it's just as absurd as to what they're doing, and I don't know. I think a lot of people get that and look at it and go, "Oh, come on, it's too much." You know, again, freedom of religion. Feel free to practice or not practice what it is you wish in the comfort of your own home. I don't want to see any laws that come and hinder your own personal worship. But give me the break where you expand it to the public sector is absolutely ridiculous.
Well, and it has been expanding. You're seeing these laws to try and shut down abortion clinics all over the United States, and they're just religious laws hidden in legalese. Women have a right to do whatever they want within their own body, and religions are saying, no, you can't. We're going to take you over, and it's Christians' religions doing it. There are some religions, like the Unitarian, the Jews, the liberal Jews, they don't care. The Church of Christ, they don't care. It's the fundamentalists that are pushing their laws into our system.
And that's a problem. There's a lot of, I think there's a lot of tolerant. I think there's a lot of Christians and Catholics, for that matter, like, hey, you know, it's not for me, but somebody wants to do it. The world's a better place when people are happy, regardless of who they love, and as long as there's no victimization going on. I think most normal people like me think that way. But again, I don't know what's the percentage of fundamentalists out there, because that's all we hear about. I think I would never. I don't think I know anyone that would go stand with the listen to the Kentucky clerks debate and stand there and cheer this. But again, you're talking about maybe not a radical, but a segment of society and fundamentalists. It's relatively narrow, isn't it?
Well, somewhere around 20 to 25% of our population, and they're sure pretty darn powerful.
Well, but that's a minority, and actually their power is shrinking, right? Like Citizens for Community Values here in Cincinnati, that has done all sorts of things, you know, as far as what they think is social justice. Even admittedly, their powers have weakened too because of this. We're kind of moving away from that. That fundamentalist social justice that they look, the social justice warriors. People are kind of tired of it. It doesn't have the political sway it once did.
I never underestimate religion to mess with your political systems. You've got to constantly keep an eye out on what they're trying to do. Nobody saw that Jerry Falwell and Pat Robertson and others of the early political movement would get anywhere near as far as they did here. I live in Kansas. We have a governor that's practically the Pope of religion here, and he has put all sorts of religious ideas in the state. And we see it all over the country. Mike Huckabee wants to be president of the United States, and he's telling us if he gets to be president, he will do a whole lot of things that will oppress minorities, especially religious minorities.
I don't think Mike Huckabee didn't have a chance in the last election. Why would he gain more power in this one? I don't see it happening, I'll be honest with you. I don't see Mike Huckabee as a viable candidate next year.
Which one of those candidates is going to say, I believe evolution is true, when asked? Now, remember, evolution is a scientific fact. It's not a theory. It's a fact. Mm-hmm. And these guys all say, no, my religion trumps that. Most of them will claim this earth is 6,000, 10,000 years old. These are presidential candidates. I'm not talking about Mike Huckabee alone. I'm talking about every one of the current political candidates out there.
Well, I think a number of these guys, maybe Huckabee included, know this, but want to play to that narrow group for votes, for support. I get that whole thing. Real quick here, Doc, what about there's a story that came out, mayor of Jackson, Mississippi, home of the cowboy, said that that we can, they have a big pothole problem down there, and said we can pray our potholes away. Which I thought was hilarious. It's like, well, what did you do with the money that was supposed to go to the potholes? You're like, you spent the money on something else, and then you went, well, why don't we pray for the pothole? I'm pretty sure of all the things that God's busy with, potholes in Jackson, Mississippi is probably not at or near the top of the list. But if you, I was looking at this today too, and maybe it was a cynic in me. I was like, oh well, I wonder if there was like a guy that runs an auto body shop, or like the Dale Donovan, the car guy of Jackson, Mississippi, who needed a little bit more money. The kids needed braces, go to college, and prayed harder than everyone else did for potholes.
Well, you got to look at Mississippi. It's number 50th in education, number 48th in intelligence, and almost number one in religiosity, and almost number one in teen pregnancies and sexually transmitted infections. Wherever you see high levels of religion, you're in the United States, the higher the religion, the more views of pornography, the more divorce. I mean, Oklahoma, Mississippi, some of those really, really religious states have very high divorce rates relative to everyone else. And, of course, the highest pornography viewing is in Mississippi and Utah, two of the most religious states in the United States. So this guy praying is not, I mean, that's the solution to everything when you're ignorant, when you don't believe in science, when you don't know how to budget a city budget. That's what's going on in these very religious places. You don't hear people praying in Massachusetts for potholes.
I think you're diminishing. I'm running really late. Hey, Dr. Darrel Ray, I thank you for the time. Again, I got this the book linked up on the blog, the God Virus. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. I point this out. I didn't have time to debate. Some of the generalizations he makes about this is like, because you're living in this, ignorant and 50th in education. I think again, people have a sense of faith. We want to believe in something in a higher power. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I think, quite honestly, the impact of traditional religions is decreasing in its impact, as you can just see throughout the United States, for that matter. I think if you're a well-balanced person, you have a sense of God and a higher power, but at the same time, you realize that government there is to serve all people. And I really think that the mainstream, most of us kind of get that whole thing. Yes, I want to be free to practice my religion. At the same time, I understand that my religion does not mean it's your religion also.